Now, and I want to ask you another question relating to some of your old memories, your impressive memories. Would you like to share a little bit about some of your childhood stories that are meaningful to you? For example, sharing a life experience that you will never forget. It can be small or special, and you think it will help people to know more about you. Relating to maybe also, is there any regrets? Is there any person you feel most grateful to? Yeah, things like that. Would you like to share a little bit, maybe one? Yeah.
To share what I missed the last thing you said.
Do you think that there is anything meaningful to you in your whole life, especially in your childhood times, which is unforgettable, and you think it will help people know you more?
Okay. I was born in Vienna, Austria. Middle-class parents. My father was a functionary in the Austrian Ministry of Import, Export. My mother was a housewife, but she was interested in psychology as just in personal interest, and would go to attend lectures in Vienna on psychology, particularly by Helene Deutsch, one of the early psychoanalysts. I have an uncle who was a very famous psychiatrist and very influential in my childhood, Manfred Sackel, who discovered the insulin coma treatment for schizophrenia. That was the first treatment for schizophrenia, and who was very influential in my childhood. Every time my mother had problems with me, she would consult Uncle Manfred, and he would tell her how to deal with me. I had, all in all, a very happy childhood. I was an only child. I loved Vienna. My father loved Vienna, the city. He was an old-fashioned monarchist, and was still dreaming after the Austrian Empire that got lost in the First World War. This came to a sudden end with the invasion by Nazi Germany. Hitler invaded Austria, March 1938. We are Jewish, so from then on, it became, life in Vienna became a kind of a nightmare, expulsion from school, all kind of mistreatments on the street, the burning of all the synagogues. It was a difficult time. I was 10 years old, and not yet some 9.5, 10 years old. And that time of very intense persecution left traits that I got over it only in the course of my psychoanalysis many years later. We left in the last moment, July 1939, stayed some time in Italy, and then emigrated to Chile. And I lived in Chile from 1940 to 1959, had a very happy adolescence, got to love the people, the language, and I missed Vienna always. And I was very involved with German culture, really, even during my adolescence in Chile. And there was a group of Jewish, German, Austrian, Hungarian immigrants in Valparaiso, the city in Chile, the Chilean main port, where we lived, where there was a lot of influence of German culture in immigration. And that influenced me very deeply. I have deep roots in German culture, in spite of the fact that I was 10 years old when I left. I got my education in Chile, had my first experiences with girls and women, and in psychiatry, had as a teacher, I was lucky, the greatest psychiatrist those years in Latin America, Ignacio Mate Blanco. Ignacio Mate Blanco was a psychoanalyst. He had trained in Great Britain. He became chairman of the Department of Psychiatry of the University of Chile. He also had been professor of neurology at the very early years. He was a kind of a genius, an excellent classical psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. He started the Chilean Psychoanalytic Institute. And when he learned that I was interested in psychiatry and psychoanalysis and that I spoke German, he had me read the German psychiatric literature. So, he told me I had to read the Bumke text. So I went to the library. Can I have the Bumke text? And she said, which volume? I didn't dare to ask Mate Blanco. So I said, well, give me all the volumes. So I started 12 volumes of descriptive German psychiatric diagnosis. And that was very helpful because this taught me how to observe patients, and it gave me a disciplined learning about observing psychological functioning, psychiatric patients. I became interested in research on psychotherapy. I had my psychoanalytic training. I entered psychoanalytic training as a medical student, paid for it by working in a parasitology laboratory. So I spent many hours microscope studying defecation. At the end, I was so used to it, I would eat my sandwich while I was doing all that observation, like everybody else. So I then continued my psychiatric training. I was interested in research in psychotherapy. I obtained a fellowship from the Rockefeller Foundation to study psychotherapy research at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in the United States with Jerome Frank, who was one of the pioneers of psychotherapy studies. Spent a year at Johns Hopkins, where again I had the extraordinary luck to be personally supervised by the director, John Whitehorn, who introduced me to the psychobiological tradition of the United States, and to do psychotherapy with psychotic patients. I went to Chestnut Lodge, who specialized in study psychotherapy of schizophrenia, did treatment of psychotic patients at Johns Hopkins, had very interesting experiences trying to do psychoanalytic treatment with a schizophrenic girl under the supervision of Harold Searles, one of the leaders of the culturalist psychoanalytic approach of Chestnut Lodge. Met people from the Menninger Foundation in Topeka, Kansas. The chairman, Robert Wallerstein, one of the leaders of the American psychoanalytic profession and who became president of the International Psychoanalytic Association. And he invited me to continue doing research at the Menninger Foundation. And so first I went back to Chile to teach everything that I'd learned, fulfilling my commitments with the Rockefeller Foundation. And then I spent 12 years in Topeka, Kansas at the Menninger Hospital, where I got to see the severe borderline patients, participate in their research projects, and where we had as a result of that major project, we find out that a healthier patient can be helped by anything. Sicker patients do better with the analysis of the transference, while there is a sufficient structure to prevent the destruction of the treatment, which then started me. I married in Chile my first wife, Paulina Kernberg, who became a major researcher in psychoanalysis and psychiatry. She was the first one to discover personality disorders in children, the first one to describe narcissistic personality in small children. We had a very happy marriage. She died of metastatic cancer of the bladder in 2006 after long illness. That was, I think, the most traumatic experience of my life. And then I was lucky to be able to establish a relationship and then get married to my present wife, Kay, whom I first met when I came to New York. She was a nurse on the borderline service at Columbia, who then studied psychology to come back and work with us in our research, and with whom I worked together for 35 years, and never imagined that we would end up not only getting married, but being very happy with each other. I have 3 children. Each of them in turn has 2 children. And I have one grandchild has been born, and another grandchild is on the way. I already told you that I'm interested in literature, particularly contemporary German and Latin American literature, in painting. I don't paint, have no talent at all, but I love painting. I love it deeply, and in film, in movies.
Yeah. I think that's enough. I think that's enough.
That's a summary of my life.
Yeah, that is enough for us to know. And thank you for sharing so much, so deep and so clear.